I was not always like this. Once, long ago, I reached for the sky. My branches fanned wide, proud and green, a canopy of life above the baked earth. Birds nested in my limbs, sang to the rhythm of wind. Children played at my roots, tracing circles in the sand, whispering stories into the cracks of my bark. I remember the sound of sandals against dry soil, the laughter of women drawing water nearby, the quiet hush of old men speaking of promises. I remember shade offered freely, patiently, even to those who never noticed they were being sheltered. Seasons came and went. My leaves turned gold, then fell, then came again. Rains returned year after year, though some seasons they teased us, falling only on the hills. Still I stood, arms lifted as if in prayer, waiting for the rhythm of life to keep its word. But then something shifted. The rains slowed. The people moved on. Their laughter faded into distant echoes, and I remained. My branches cracked one by one, brittle with thirst. The birds stopped coming. The wind lost its song. The sun, once a warm friend, became a relentless blaze. I stood until I could no longer. Then I fell. Now, I am only what remains. A trunk split down the middle, roots clutching dry soil as if still hoping to draw breath. They call me the dead tree. They sit on me sometimes, never knowing what I once was. Children no longer play here. Travelers pass by without looking. Dust gathers where dew once lingered. But I still remember. I remember being alive. And in that memory, I ache not only for what I was, but for something more, for something promised. They spoke of it once, the elders who gathered at sunset, their voices slow and deep, carved with reverence. They spoke of a shoot that would rise from the stump of Jesse. They said it would come when the earth was driest, when hope was nothing but a rumor. At the time, I did not understand. I thought they were telling bedtime tales to help children sleep. But now, as my rings grow quiet and no new leaves crown my head, I wonder if I am that stump. I wonder if, from Meor, something like me, a miracle might still unfold. There is a quiet in me now, not the kind that comes from peace, but from waiting too long. The kind that hears every insect burrow, every breeze shift. The kind that dreams not in color, but in ache. And yet, beneath this silence, something stirs. Not in my body, I know that decay too well, but in my knowing. Something has changed in the air. The sky smells different. The stars look lower. And deep in the earth, where my roots still touch soil, there is a faint vibration, as if the world is drawing breath. What if the breath is not for another season, but for another promise? What if this dryness is not the end, but the setting of a stage? The elders spoke not only of a shoot, but of a light, a dawn that would split the night not with fury, but with mercy, a voice that would not shout, but whisper, and even the stones would listen. I am not a stone. I am something even more fragile now, but maybe, just maybe, that makes me ready. I am no longer proud. I am no longer high. I am low enough to listen. I do not ask for leaves. I do not ask to bloom. I ask only to be near when it happens. If he comes, this one they wait for, this promised, I want to be here. Even if I am unseen, even if I am the dust beneath his feet, I want to feel the vibration of his step, to taste the change in the wind when he passes by. I want to recognize him not with eyes I have none, but with the memory of life that still lingers in my broken rings. Let it be so. Let this gnarled body, this forgotten witness, remain, not for glory, not for a second spring, but for the moment he walks near. And if I crack further in his presence, so be it. If I splinter under the weight of hope, so be it. I am ready not for water, but for word, not for branches, but for breath, not for life as I once knew it, but for life that changes all death into beginning. Let them call me dead. I will not argue. But I know something they do not. I am not empty. I am waiting. And in the waiting, I am more alive than I have ever been. They think I am still. That once I fell, all motion ceased. That I am nothing more than a fallen limb, a forgotten contour against the dunes. But deep beneath the crusted soil, where light never reaches and the sun's heat fades to silence, my roots remain. They no longer drink, not in the way they once did. The rivers they once loved have shifted or vanished, pulled away by time or men or heaven's own design. Yet, they stretch, they reach, blindly, stubbornly, not for water anymore but for memory. It is strange, this kind of memory, not stored in words or images, but in the feel of stone against root, in the cold of deep layers, in the gentle tremble of distant footsteps above. There were times long ago when I could feel entire caravans pass, donkeys with hooves soft and rhythmical, camels that groaned, children who dragged sticks in the dust, spelling names I never learned. And at night, when the desert cooled and the stars poured down like oil, the ground would hold their campfire warmth just long enough for my roots to feel a whisper of their stories. Those stories linger. They coil in my roots like old songs. I can still sense the cadence of a mother humming, the hush of a father telling his child not to fear the wolves. I remember the men who sat around the fire, their backs bent, their voices heavy with prophecy. A child will come, one said, not in splendor, but in silence. Another added, he will grow like a tender shoot, not seen by kings, but known by the poor. They said these things not to me, but around me. And though I could not speak, I listened. I still listen. My roots have gone deaf to water, but not to words. In the deep soil, words echo longer than in the air. They reverberate, slowed by clay and stone, made sacred by stillness. And the older the word, the deeper it sinks. Some words have made it all the way down to my very core. Words like promise, like wait, like soon. But soon is a cruel word to a creature that counts time in centuries. How long is soon when you have lost track of spring, when every season blends into the next and the rains forget your name? I have heard many promises, from travelers, from priests, from the wind itself, and yet the fulfillment has always belonged to someone else, another place, another tree, another chosen. Still, I do not reject them, because even the echoes are a kind of presence. They remind me that hope once passed through here, that this soil, this dry cradle of rock and dust, once held the weight of expectation, and perhaps it still does. Perhaps the very fact that I am still here unmoved, unbroken in my roots means I was never meant to leave, that I am still part of the story, even if no one remembers my name. Sometimes, when the nights grow long and the stars stretch their cold fingers down into the ground, I feel something sternate in the soil, but in the memory of the soil, as if it recalls a time before me, when the earth itself was young, and all things were new, and no promise had yet been broken. That memory does not belong to me, but I lean into it. I let it hold me, and in that embrace, I ask the only question that remains. Could it be again? Could there be another beginning? One that does not forget the old roots, but honors them. One that does not cut away the past, but grows from it not despite the decay, but because of it. I do not ask for a forest. I ask for a seed. I ask for the kind of beginning that chooses the weak, the low, the unseen. I do not believe I was always meant to fall, but I believe I was meant to remain, for this long silence, for this deep longing, for the day when the word would become root and the promise would seek out the ancient places to begin again. So I wait, and I listen, not for water, but for footsteps, not for leaves, but for light. If he is coming, he will come this way. He will come to what is forgotten, what is dry, what is dead in name but alive in ache. And when he does, my roots, though silent, will know. They will rise, not to drink, but to welcome, not to grow, but to witness. And in that witness, I will remember that I was never just a tree. I was an altar, waiting for fire, waiting for word. I have watched them for longer than they think. Through the stillness of my rings and the depth of my roots, I have observed the ones who move above me. They come, they go. Their feet leave prints in the dust, but the wind erases them before nightfall. Their voices rise in prayer, in song, in argument, then fall back into silence. They carry burdens I cannot lift and dreams I cannot name, and yet I feel their weight upon the ground as if it presses into my own memory. Generation after generation, their faces change, but their questions do not. I have seen joy lit like fire in their eyes when a child is born, and I have felt the earth tremble with grief when a loved one is buried beneath it. They are a storm of longing, a tide of hope and fear, always moving, always searching. And I, rooted, unmoving, have learned to read the truth in the way they walk. Some walk with the stiffness of pride, some with the weariness of sorrow, some with the lightness of forgiveness. I have come to know these patterns like the way I once knew sunlight, and I hold them close in the absence of new leaves. There were years when they came often, sitting in my shade, speaking of the one who would come. Not just anyone, but the one, the anointed, the Son. They believed he would arrive with banners, that he would ride upon the clouds and strike down oppressors with divine thunder. But others, quiet ones, believed differently. They said he would come like dew on the grass, unnoticed at first, yet nourishing, like a whisper too soft for ears but too powerful for the heart to ignore. I listened to them all. Their hope was raw, sometimes desperate, sometimes stubborn. And I, silent as I was, began to carry that hope inside my hollow. I did not need to speak it aloud, it grew in me like a secret seed. And then they stopped coming. War came, fire came, the land cracked open and the people scattered. My branches, already brittle, broke completely. What was left of me was no longer beautiful. No one sought shade from a corpse. Still, now and then, someone would pass. A woman, veiled, clutching a child, an old man leaning on a staff, eyes turned to heaven, a boy chasing a goat with laughter too big for his small body, and I would watch. I could not offer shelter, not anymore, but I could witness, and in that witnessing, I learned something truer than any prophecy I'd heard before. These people, they were not waiting for a conqueror. They were waiting for consolation, for someone who saw them, for someone who would not pass by the broken or shame, the barren or silence, the weeping, someone who would stop, not for glory, but for love. It took me years to understand that kind of hope. Hope not as a strategy, but as a cry, not as a weapon, but as a wound. And I, being wounded, would, understood it better than I wished. So when I hear them still speak his name, in fragments and whispers, I do not scoff. I listen. I remember. I treasure their longing as if it were my own. Because perhaps it is. Perhaps all these years of watching, of waiting, of being passed over, have not been in vain. Perhaps I have become something sacred not because of what I offer, but because of what I endure. They call themselves forgetful, faithless, but I have seen otherwise. Even in exile, they carry candles. Even in silence, they sing. And when they speak of the one who is to come, they do not ask that he bring riches or revenge. They ask that he be with them, that he stay, that he see. I, too, have that prayer now, that when he comes, he will not overlook what is old and withered, that he will place his hand not on the strong or tall, but on the stump that still remembers what it once meant to give shade, that he will not speak in thunder, but in the soft voice of a shepherd calling a lamb by name. And if that is how he comes, then I will know him. Even without eyes, I will know. Even without branches, I will lift. Even without breath, I will believe. There are things you only begin to understand after you have been broken, not shattered in an instant, but worn down slowly, season by season, until what remains is no longer a tree, no longer shade, no longer beauty, but a form stripped of purpose, left to ask whether it ever truly belonged. I did not begin as a prophet, I began as a tree. I did not ask to carry mystery or meaning. I stretched toward the sun, I drank the rain, I held birds in my branches, and let the children carve initials into my bark. Life was simple then, a cycle I trusted. But then came the heat that would not leave, the dryness that reached into my marrow, the silence that fell over the land like a final breath. My branches withered one by one, until only my trunk remained cracked, blackened, bent toward the dust like a prayer unanswered. That is when I heard them, not the birds or the children, but the elders. They came not for me, but near me, to read from old scrolls. I listened not because I was curious, but because I had nothing else. And what they spoke changed me. They said, "A shoot shall spring from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots." At first I heard it as a tale, a story spoken to give old men comfort as their years fell away. But the more they said it, the more it pressed into me, not just into my bark, but into the deep, aching places I did not know could still feel. The words did not pass like wind. They settled, they stayed, and then, somehow, they began to shape me. Not outwardly, I was still the same ruined form, but inwardly, in places no eye sees. It was as though the prophecy carved itself into my flesh with gentle hands, not wounding me, but reminding me I had not been forgotten. I did not believe I could be part of it. Who would look to a dry stump for hope? Who would believe life could begin again in something so thoroughly abandoned? Yet the words remained, and they began to change my questions. I no longer asked why I had fallen, but whether my falling had meaning. I no longer mourned what I had lost, but listened for what might still come. I began to see my bark as more than scars. I began to see it as scripture, not one written by men, but by time, pain, and the quiet hand of God. They stopped coming eventually, those old men. Their voices faded, their scrolls grew brittle, their prayers went unanswered, or so it seemed. And I was left alone again, but not the same, because something had entered me. Not just a memory, not just a phrase, but a presence. The prophecy had taken root. It did not bloom. It did not shout. It did not transform me into a towering cedar. But it held me. It stayed through the years when nothing else did. And in that staying, it became a promise I carried not on the surface, but in the hidden rings of who I was. There were days I doubted, when the winds howled, and I wondered if even God had turned his face. There were nights when the stars seemed colder than death, and I asked whether I had misunderstood. But then came mornings when the silence itself hummed with a music I could not explain, and I knew the words were still true, not because I saw the shoot, but because I had become the place where its coming would be possible. I am not Jesse, but I am a stump. I am a remnant, and perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the point of the prophecy was never lineage or location, but readiness. Readiness to be the place where something new might break forth. Not because of worth, but because of waiting. My waiting has not been passive. It has not been easy. It has burned through every illusion I once held about permanence, strength, pride. I have been hollowed. I have been humbled. And yet I have endured. And in that endurance, I have become something I was not before. Empty enough for promise, still enough to listen, open enough to receive. They may not see it. They may pass me by. But the lines on my bark are not random. They are testimony. They are verses no human hand wrote, but every suffering shape. And when he comes, the one they waited for, the one I wait for, still I believe he will see them. He will read them, not with eyes, but with heart. He will know that I, too, have waited, that I, too, have borne the silence. And perhaps he will rest his hand on me, not to restore my branches, but to honor my waiting. And if from me, or beneath me, or because of me, even the smallest green shoot breaks the soil, then let it be known that the word did not return empty. It waited, and it was received, and I was the place where it made its home. There are nights when even the stars forget to shine, nights so thick with silence that not even the wind dares to move, as if the sky itself is holding its breath. These are the nights I know too well, not the gentle darkness that invites rest, but the kind that presses down like the weight of unanswered prayers. Nights without moon, without warmth, without memory. In such nights, time ceases to be rhythm. It becomes ache, an ache that wraps itself around what is left of me like a second bark, rougher than the first, less visible but far more real. I used to fear these nights. I used to wonder if they were a punishment, a forgetting, but now I know they are something else entirely. They are the crucible of faith, the place where all illusions die and only the essential remains. It is in these nights that I feel most clearly what I have become: a tree, not a monument, but a witness to the silence between promise and fulfillment. I remember the moon. I remember when it rose like a silver hope across the hills, casting shadows that danced across my roots, revealing foxes and fireflies, lovers and wanderers. I remember when its light touched my highest leaves and made them shimmer like glass. That was long ago, before the fall, before the forgetting, before the drought of presence. Now the moon comes rarely, and when it does, it seems thinner, more hesitant, as if afraid of what it might find. Most nights, it does not come at all. And so I have learned to live by another kind of light, the kind that is not seen but known, the kind that remains even when all visible signs have vanished, the kind that does not promise relief, but presence, not warmth, but witness. They used to say God speaks in light, but I have come to believe He also speaks in the dark, not with words, but with waiting, not with answers, but with endurance. The night is not absence, it is invitation, an invitation to stay when everything says go, to remain rooted when everything above has broken, to believe not because there is evidence, but because there is remembrance, remembrance of a voice that once spoke, of a promise that once burned, of a hope that once filled the air like perfume. It is this remembrance that keeps me from despair. Even in the longest nights, I know I am not alone. I may not see Him, but He sees me. I may not feel Him, but I am held, not by hands, but by the fidelity of His silence. Because there is a silence that forgets, and there is a silence that holds. His silence holds. It does not erase the ache. It sanctifies it. It does not deny the darkness. It inhabits it. And so I wait, not for dawn, but for the one who does not fear the dark. The one who will come not with torches, but with wounds, not to dispel the night, but to dwell in it, to fill it, to redeem it from within. I wait for the light that does not crush the dark, but makes it sacred, the light that calls even the dead stump a beginning. These nights without moon have taught me what no season of fruit ever could, that faith is not what you hold when the sun is high, but what holds you when there is no light at all. And in that holding, something deeper than life begins, something that cannot be cut down, something that even death cannot erase. I do not know how much longer the nights will stretch. I do not know if I will ever feel leaves again, but I know this. The darkness is not my enemy. It is the veil before the voice, the space before the step, the pause before the word. So let the moon hide, let the stars forget, let the wind fall still. I am not afraid. I have learned to listen to the dark, and what I hear there is not despair. It is the slow pulse of promise, still alive, still present, still waiting to be born. It did not arrive with thunder. There were no clouds parting, no voice from heaven, no angelic light rending the silence. It came quietly. So quietly I would have missed it had I not learned, over all these years, to listen to things no one else hears. It came not in sound, but in scent a shift in the wind, so subtle, so brief, that it might have been imagined. But I did not imagine it. I know the difference. I have lived through thousands of winds, scorching, still, shrieking, indifferent. But this one was different. This wind carried moisture not yet rain, fragrance not yet flower, memory not yet moment. It was the breath of something awakening, not out there in the hills, but in here in me. I did not move. I cannot move. But every fiber in what remains of me leaned toward it, stretched toward it, reached into the dust for its source. There had been other signs before, or at least things that masqueraded as signs, sudden clouds that disappeared, footsteps that passed too quickly, rumors in the soil that proved to be nothing more than echoes. But this was not like those. This did not shout, it whispered. And because it whispered, I listened harder. That night, for the first time in generations, the wind did not dry me. It stirred something. Deep within what had become hollow, I felt it, the echo of movement. Not growth, not yet, but awareness. A stirring not of sap, but of soul. I cannot explain it in the language of men. I have none of their words. But if I did, I would say it was like remembering how to breathe. As if my roots had found not water, but waiting. A kind of waiting that was alive. That pulsed. That knew. I tried not to hope. Hope is dangerous when you have been still this long. Hope can cut deeper than drought. But the wind did not go away. It came again the next evening, and again the morning after. Always soft, always brief, like the knock of something polite, asking if I was still here, and each time, something more awakened in me. A memory of a leaf, the echo of a branch, the weight of a bird's claw, not in form, but in desire. I remembered wanting to live. That frightened me. Wanting is not easy when you have trained yourself not to expect, when you have buried your hope beneath layers of silence just to keep from breaking further. But now something was unearthing it, gently, persistently, not asking for belief, only for attention. So I gave it. I let myself listen to what could not yet be seen. And then, one morning, when the light came low across the hills and the air held that same promise, I felt it a shift in the bark. A crack, yes, but not the kind born of decay. This was softer, warmer, and from it, a breath of green. Not a shoot, not yet, just the first pulse of possibility, the edge of maybe. It was not enough to be called change, but it was enough to call me, to remind me that the promise had not died. It had only gone quiet. It had only waited for the moment when I was still enough, empty enough, surrendered enough to become its soil. That was the sign, not in the wind, not in the scent, but in the readiness of a stump to receive again, to believe again, not because of proof, but because of presence. Something is coming, not with banners, not with fanfare, but with breath, with tenderness, with the insistence of a seed that knows it belongs. I do not know when it will appear. I do not know what form it will take, but I know this: the waiting was not in vain. The silence was not abandonment, it was preparation. The one I have longed for will not arrive in lightning. He will arrive like this wind, like this scent, like this barely visible green edge of becoming. And when he does, he will not ask for what I was. He will receive me as I am. And that is the greatest sign of all that. He comes not to the strong, but to the still, not to the forest, but to the forgotten, not to the lush, but to the longing. And two will be ready, because the sign was small, but it was real. It did not happen all at once. There was no storm to mark the boundary, no trumpet to declare the passing of one age into another. There was only a gradual unfolding, so soft that even the soil seemed unsure whether to call it spring. And yet, something was shifting. The wind, once sharp and dry like broken promises, now moved with a roundness, a weight that hinted at hidden waters. It no longer stung, it caressed. The sun, too, had changed. It no longer burned with indifference. It lingered. It warmed not with power, but with patience. These were not the signs I had imagined when I first heard the prophecy. I had thought it would come with clarity, with drama. I had thought the return of hope would be loud, unmistakable. But now I see how the holy often arrives quietly, beneath notice, like the first dew before the garden wakes. It began in my roots, not with a rush, but with a pulse. A slow, steady beat, like the distant echo of a heart I had forgotten was mine. I felt it not as motion, but as memory returning to flesh. The memory of rising, of stretching, of drinking deep. I had believed those memories were relics, locked in rings no one would ever read. But now they stirred, not in longing, but in preparation. And above, in the cracked bark that had long ceased to matter, a thin line deepened not in fracture, but in invitation. A soft split, as if the wood itself were exhaling, making room. And from that line, the smallest green thread, a whisper, not even a leaf merged. It did not ask for attention. It did not claim to be fulfillment. It simply was. And in being, it declared everything had changed. Not in the world around me. The hills were still dry. The sky was still silent. But inside me, the season had turned. That is the mystery of true transformation. It does not require outward confirmation. It begins within, where no eye sees, where only the spirit moves. I did not grow that green thread. I did not will it into being. It arrived not because I was worthy, but because I was willing. Willing to be still, willing to be barren, willing to be open. The world around me noticed nothing. The animals passed as they always had. The stars blinked indifferently. The travelers did not pause. But I knew that the one who was to come was near. Not because I saw him, but because I was no longer empty. Not because I heard his voice, but because I had learned to listen beyond sound. The shift in season was not marked by temperature or time. It was marked by presence, a presence that did not descend from the clouds, but rose from within. As if the promise had not arrived from outside, but had awakened in me. I had carried it unknowingly, like a seed buried so deep beneath pain that even hope forgot it was there. But now it rose, not in triumph, in trust, in truth. And with it came the understanding that this new season was not about flourishing in the way I once had. It was not about becoming tall or leafy again. It was about becoming true, about being what I was always meant to be, a witness, not of power, but of faithfulness, not of might, but of mercy. For this is how the kingdom comes, not with armies, but with shoots, not with thunder, but with tenderness. And I were invited not to force it, but to welcome it, to hold space for its unfolding. I will not bloom like before. I will not become a forest. But in me, something green has begun, and that green is enough. It is the testimony of the faithful remnant, the holy proof that what is rooted in God will one day rise, that even in the most unlikely stump, a beginning can be born. And so I remain, not waiting as before, but witnessing, not empty, but expectant. I remain, not because I have been restored, but because I have been remembered. The season has changed, and I with it, not through noise, but through knowing, not by force, but by grace. And now, when the wind touches me, it no longer sounds like sorrow, it sounds like song. I have no eyes, yet I see. I have no tongue, yet I tremble with the words I cannot say. For something has happened not only upon me, but within me. Something that the years of silence prepared, something the nights without moon made possible. The shoot has risen, not just any shoot, not a mere branch of recovery, but a chosen one, a choi nan. Yes, but one, unlike any I had ever known or dared imagine. It grew not from will, not from climate, not from chance, but from covenant, from a promise older than the dust itself, spoken before time was numbered, whispered through prophets, and now fulfilled. It is small, so small that if one did not know how to look, they would miss it entirely. But I feel him, I know him, not because he thundered, but because he breathed. Not because he claimed, but because he came. He did not rise in defiance of my brokenness. He rose through it. He did not bypass my wounds. He inhabited them. His roots twined through my splintered marrow, not as parasite, but as presence, gentle, unhurried, holy. The life that now pulses through me is not mine. It is borrowed, gifted, entrusted. I am not revived in the way forests are. I am not becoming what I was. I am becoming what I was always meant to be, resting place for redemption. They said he would come from the line of Jesse, and I had always assumed that meant royalty, blood, lineage. But now I understand. The line was never about family. It was about faithfulness, about God remembering what we had forgotten, about love choosing the lowly, the broken, the barren, choosing me. He could have grown anywhere, on the heights of power, in the gardens of kings, in the groves that still flourish by the riverbanks. But he chose here. He chose the stump. He chose what had nothing left to offer, so that no one could boast. And now I am filled not with pride, but with wonder. For in this small green shoot, I feel the heart of heaven beating. I feel mercy putting on flesh. I feel justice bending low enough to kiss the earth. I do not know what he will become. I do not know where this route will lead, but I know he carries within him something eternal, not just for me, but for all creation. He is not just a sign of new life. He is life itself, life that listens, life that sees, life that stays. The birds have returned, not many, but enough to remind me of mornings long gone. They perch lightly, not on my dead wood, but on his green stem, and they sing not the songs of old, but something new, something both ancient and fresh, as if the melodies of angels have found their way into feathers. I do not understand their language, but I recognize the joy, and the soil beneath me responds. Where once there was only dust, there is now a slow softening, a readiness to receive. Even the wind carries a new fragrance, like incense before the altar of time. And I, who was forgotten, now find myself in the very center of a mystery I cannot comprehend. People will pass this way soon. They will not come to see me. They will come for him. They will not ask about my waiting. They will speak of his coming. And that is enough, For this is not my glory, this is his gift. I was only ever meant to make space, to hold the silence, to cradle the seed until the word could be born. And now he is here, not in fullness, not yet, but in truth, in tenderness, in the trembling courage of a beginning that carries eternity within its breath. The prophets were right. The promise was true. The shoot has risen from the stump of Jesse, and he shall not be cut down. He shall not fail. He shall grow, and in his growing, all things shall be made new, including me, especially me. I, who once despaired of fruit, now shelter the very root of salvation. I, who once mourned my uselessness, now hold the hope of nations. I do not know how long he will remain here, or what storms may come. But I will not fear, for the one who is coming has already come, and he has chosen to come through me. I remember when I was called tree, when the earth warmed my roots, and the sky wrapped its seasons around my branches like a promise not yet fulfilled. There were voices then, sacred and simple, speaking of the one who would come. They said he would rise like a branch from the stump of Jesse, and I, rooted in silence, listened even when no one else did. But then the silence grew heavier. Time wore away the memory of my leaves, the strength of my trunk, and I became what they call useless, a stump. Yet I remained, not growing, not dying, just here. The soil forgot my name, the birds forgot my branches. The children no longer ran in my shade. I became invisible, but in that invisibility, something stirred, not in the wind or the earth, but within me, a pressure, faint as breath. I had long surrendered the idea of movement, of anything breaking through my hardened core. Yet here it was, not a force, but a presence, not a sound, but a knowing. The bark cracked not loudly, but deliberately, and from it, a sliver of green, a whisper of life pushing from my center, not despite my stillness, but because of it. It did not announce itself. It did not demand recognition. It simply grew, a shoot, a small, trembling, holy thread of becoming. And in that moment, I knew I had not been forgotten. I had been chosen. The promise had not passed me by. It had waited for the right emptiness to enter. He did not arrive in power. He did not come with trumpets. He came through my death, not around it. He made my barrenness his birthplace, and every cell of me, every dry ring of memory, every crack in my core, now pulsed with his presence, the Choi Nan, not a symbol, not a metaphor, a real, living, incarnate presence of the one long promised. He did not just emerge from me, he became one with me, and I became not merely a stump, but sanctuary. The soil knew it, the sky leaned closer, even the shadows dared not settle the way they used to. His growing was gentle, but unrelenting. Each day he pressed further into the light, and with him I changed, not in form, but in meaning. I was no longer the memory of a tree, I was the cradle of salvation. The shoot from Jesse's line had not come in majesty, but in mercy, and the world, still rushing past, did not yet see it. They still saw a stump. They still overlooked the silent miracle unfurling in their midst. But that did not matter. This salvation was not spectacle. It was seed, and seeds grow in secret. He did not need witnesses. He needed space, and space was what I had become. I do not know what I will become, but I know what I now hold. Not a future, but a fulfillment. Not a plan, but a person. He is not what I expected, but he is all I ever longed for. And even if the world never sees it, I have seen him, and that is enough. They still call me dead. When they pass, they see only absence, only ruin, only what was. They do not see what is becoming. They do not sense the quiet shifting within, but I do. I feel it with every moment of stillness, with every echo that no longer feels hollow. I was once empty in despair. Now I am empty in readiness. Once I was discarded. Now I am being reclaimed. He is still small. The green is still tender, but he is here, growing, stretching, becoming, and in his becoming, I am changed, not restored to what I was, but remade into something I never imagined. I do not need leaves to live. I do not need branches to stretch. I live now because he lives in me. His presence redefines what it means to be alive. I used to think life meant motion, that living meant growing upward, outward, visible to the world. But he teaches me another way. He teaches me that life begins where surrender is total, that to be alive is not always to be seen, but to be inhabited. I am inhabited, not by memories, not by ghosts, but by the one who chose to dwell in dryness, to root himself in the forgotten. This is not the life the world seeks. It is the life that seeks the world. I am no longer seeking meaning. I am being filled with meaning. Every crack in my bark, every hollow where rot once crept, now pulses with his presence. There is no more death here, only space for grace to unfold. And still they pass me by. Still they speak of what I used to be. But I do not mind. Let them speak. Let them name me as stump, as ruin, as death. I know another truth. I know what stirs beneath. I know the breath of God has found me again, that the word, eternal and gentle, has taken root where no one thought to look. Death has not been erased. It has been transformed. This is not a return. It is a resurrection. This is not revival. It is redemption. I do not bloom, but I bear. I do not stand tall, but I hold deep. I do not sing aloud, but I echo the word made small. And this is the new life. Not loud, not swift, but faithful. And I am not alone, for all across the world, other stumps stir. Other places of absence begin to swell with promise. He does not only grow in me, he grows in all who are willing to remain, to make room, to become less so, he may become more. This is what they do not see, that to die is not the end, that to be forgotten is not to be forsaken, that to be cut down is not to be cursed. Sometimes it is preparation. Sometimes the roots need stillness to hear him come. Sometimes the stump must lie quiet until the shoot is ready. And now, I am ready. I do not carry leaves. I carry life, not in memory, but in mystery, not in grandeur, but in grace. Let them call me dead. I am more alive now than I ever was, not because of what I do, but because of who I hold. And he, the shoot, the branch, the word, the son, he lives, and so do I. They once called me stump, useless, abandoned, left behind after generations of forgetting. I bore no fruit, cast no shade, offered no comfort. They passed me without pause, children playing around me but never upon me, travelers choosing cleaner paths, even the birds seeing no purpose in perching upon my silence. My roots had long ceased to drink deep, not from lack of desire but from resignation. The soil and I shared a secret agreement. I was finished, not in anger, not in pain, but in surrender. And in that surrender, I remained. Then came the shoot, the whisper of green, that small sacred defiance growing not from strength, but from stillness. That was not the end. That was the beginning of the beginning. What I did not expect was what came after. I had thought I was only to cradle a promise, to hold a mystery in silence. But now I was asked for more, not to stretch, not to bloom, but to become something altogether new. I felt the hands again, carpenters, rough with work, gentle with purpose. They came not with destruction, but with intention. They did not take my strength. They honored my surrender. They cut not to ruin, but to reveal. I became form again, not as tree, but as vessel. They shaped me into what I never imagined I could be. A manger, a feeding trough for animals. Yes, but more than that, a cradle. And not just any cradle, the place where eternity would lie wrapped in time, where the infinite would breathe as one confined by lungs and ribs, where the maker of stars would blink under the flicker of firelight, where cries would not command angels, but echo through rafters of a barn. He came. He lay within me, not upon thrones of gold, not beneath banners of conquest, but within mellowly, repurposed, remembered, the one whom prophets longed to see, whom kings had feared, whom wise men now searched for, lay upon my old grain, my knotted frame, my weathered wood. The air did not shimmer, the earth did not shake, but I knew. Oh, I knew. Every fiber of me, every ring that once counted years of drought and fire and loss, now pulsed with purpose. His warmth soaked into my being, not from without, but from within. I no longer bore the scent of rot. I smelled of promise, of hope, of him. He did not ask me to be perfect, only to be present, to be here, just as I am, and let myself be used. And in that letting, I became holy. I no longer envy the living trees or the pillars of temples. I would not trade this stillness, this calling. I hold the Christ, not in grandeur, in grain, not in gold, in humility. They will speak of Bethlehem, of shepherds and angels, of stars and song, but I will remember the weight of his breath, the warmth of his skin, the silent knowing that passed between his tiny frame and my silent self. He needed a place to lay. I became that place, and in doing so, I was reborn. I am no longer stump. I am no longer dead. I am no longer what I once feared I would always be. I am manger. I am mercy. I am the memory of wood made worthy again. And through me, through this quiet space where the Word became flesh, the world will never be the same.